Welcome to Watson's second annual Flag Field of Honor ceremony. Absolutely, thank you. We are pleased to have the following guests in attendance with us today. Mayor Murray, Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Gavin, Mr. Murphy, and most of all, our honored veterans, along with our Watson staff and students. I'd like to invite to the podium Aiden Breen.
Please rise for the birthday allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing.
My country says of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. And when my father's side, and of thy pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom bring.
Thank you, Bernice, for leading our whole school and community in that song. You may please be seated. Students, you can remain standing. You have youth. Do you know a veteran? Veterans are people who served our country in the armed forces. The Navy, the Army, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and recently created the Space Force. Veterans worked hard to keep the United States a safe place to live.
Veterans Day is celebrated every year on November 11th. Veterans Day was originally called Armistice Day. Armistice Day began after World War I, ended with the peace treaty that was signed on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 11 a.m. on November 11th. Armistice Day was a day to remember the veterans from World War I. America fought in other wars after World War I, so Armistice Day was renamed Veterans Day. Veterans Day is not just for remembering people who fought in the wars. We also remember the people who have kept and continue to keep our country safe in times of peace. People in the armed forces perform many jobs for which we are thankful.
One way to show gratitude to veterans is to fly American flags, as we are doing today in Watson's Field of Honor. Each flag honors a veteran that is a family member or friend of the Watson School community. There are over 80 flags on the Watson Field of Honor, and we will read the names of this year's honored veterans and the branch of the armed forces in which they serve. Mrs. Grubb?
All right, let's be still with those flags so we can listen. These people are really important to Watson families. James Regan, Sergeant of Army Rangers. Joe Carroll, Captain of the U.S. Marine Corps. Barry Schlacks, Air Force. Lou DeLuca, Marines. Anthony Mascara, Army. Vito Millardo, U.S. Army 101st Infantry. Paul Mazzola, E5 Sergeant, Army. Dr. Stephen Creason, Army. Mr. Gerard A. Davis Sr., Army. James Burns, Chief Master Sergeant, Air Force. James Rudolph, Lance Corporal, Marine Corps. Joseph F. Huffnagel, U.S. Navy Radioman, P.O., 3rd Class of World War II. Richard H. Freeman, Captain, U.S. Marine Corps. James E. Gilchrist, U.S. Air Force. Gerard Savarese, First Mate, Navy. Gilberto Luna, Lance Corporal, U.S. Marines. William Phelan, U.S. Navy, World War II. the veterans at the St. Albans, Virginia. Ronald J. Emmerich, Sergeant, Army. Keith Owens, Coast Guard. James Lair, Marines. Danny Gilmore, Army. Patrick Christian, U.S. Marine Corps. Donald Norris, Sr., Navy. Frank Anglisano, Petty Officer, First Class, U.S. Navy. Christopher Moran, Sergeant, Army. Paul Schlegelmilch, Patrick Martin. Fred McGruin, Corporal, Army. William Cassidy, Private, First Class, Marine Corps. Bernard Wilthayer, Army Sergeant. Adolph Tautel, Army. Fred Gonzalez, Air Force. Kenneth Henyon, Captain, U.S. Army. Bart Simon, U.S. Army. John Lindstrom, Sergeant, U.S. Army. Susan Braun, Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel. Joseph Master Giovanni. Salvatore Kranga, Navy. Justin Gorkowski, Army. Christopher Roach, Navy. John T. King, Army. Albert Garofano, Army. Angelo Signa, Army. Ray Don Ford, Army. Let's give a round of applause for all of our honored veterans. You guys are doing a great job. The money raised from the sale of the flags will be donated to the Army Ranger Lead the Way Fund. Lead the Way started to honor fallen Army Ranger James Regan, who grew up in Manhasset, not too far from Rockville Center. Sergeant Regan would be the first to step up and help a fellow veteran. Now this great organization provides financial support to veterans or active military members and their families beyond what the government is able to provide.
Through this endeavor, we raised $1,000, and I would now like to present the check to Mr. Jim Regan, father of Army Ranger James Regan. Mr. Regan is the chairman and the CEO of the Army Ranger Lead the Way Fund.
Can you guys turn the other way to the cameras, please?
Our lawn will be adorned with these American flags from now until December 7th, which is the anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. We hope they serve our community as a reminder of the service the veterans gathered here and all across the great nation. Before I close the ceremony, I'd like to thank a few people, Mr. Bookman, Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Kneppel, who all their hard work in actually putting up these and setting up our field of honor for the flags. Mr. Mariano for helping with the sound system, Miss Vicky and Miss Barbara who organize everything and anything that goes on here, and of course Mrs. Grubb and Mrs. Montemarano for leading us in this amazing celebration. So can we give them all a big round of applause? And I would now like to ask all of our veterans to stand as we end our ceremony with "You're a Grand Old Flag." It's your moment, man. It's your moment.